Hi guys, welcome back to another Hugh Jeffreys video. In this video, I'm going to be showcasing the restoration of my 1935 Dodge. What started out as a wrecked vintage car that had been involved in an accident, missing parts and needing a lot of work was beautifully restored by my father and I, in a 4-year-long journey starting in 2014. This video is an overview on everything we did to the Dodge in those 4 years. Included is plenty of old clips and footage I shot back in the day.
Oh my god, that looks amazing from the front.
If you've ever stumbled across my website, you may have read about this very car, or even seen a few Instagram posts over the years. Anyway, I thought it was about time I did a video on it. I'd like to introduce a special guest, my dad, who helped me restore this car.
Good afternoon, Hugh.
Dad, how did you get the car and how much did you pay for it?
I purchased the car from a friend of your grandfather's who had crashed the car, and I paid $2,000 at the time for it, but it wasn't going.
So, what was wrong with it?
It had been in a crash. It crashed to the traffic lights into a truck, and the front end was pushed back. The motor had been pushed back into the firewall a bit.
And all the chassis was bent, was that right?
And the chassis was bent in the front, yeah.
So initially you had the chassis straightened and had some work done to it early on when you first got it, is that right?
That was the first thing that was done, to straighten the chassis.
Afterwards, Dad proceeded no further as he couldn't find a replacement grille. So the car was garaged for about 10 years before I became interested in the car and wanted to help my dad get it up and running again. The first thing we did was take it to a mechanic to get them to check over the engine and get it running. It didn't sound good. Our mechanic investigated and found it was just a stuck valve which he managed to get free after adding some lubricant to the cylinders. With that, it was time to take it home.
It's moving. Knock.
One issue was the brakes were locked up, so moving the car was difficult and driving it up steep, wet ramps wasn't a good idea. Our mechanics said it would be okay, but of course it slid right off. Jacking up the car, we could reposition the ramp and winch the car the rest of the way up.
Yeah, I reckon winch it up.
But we eventually got it and brought it home.
And she's off. How's it all going, Dad?
Good. Real good. The car wasn't clean. It was far from that. It took a lot of degreasing, a lot of decrudding.
We went through a bit of a phase there. We went
go
through lots of
a
cans
phase,
as well.
We did.
We wanted to make everything as spotless as it could, get
We
all the
spent
grease
months.
off of it. Yeah, we took, the floor out, we're cleaning everything, we put all new fluids in everything. Tried to make it as fresh as it could be. We gave it a complete overhaul.
Looks nice. Yeah, it's plenty. That's good. Got a good,
So initially, when we started driving the Dodge around, just moving it in and out of the shed, we noticed this really loud knocking sound, which seemed to be coming from the gearbox area, which was quite concerning. Now, it wasn't anything to do with the engine, and actually turned out to be the drive shaft bolts that connect to the back of the gearbox. They were just loose and needed tightening. It took us probably a couple of weeks or maybe even a month or two to figure out what that sound was and why it was happening. It was a little bit concerning, but it was just a simple fix nonetheless. The next issue we faced was it was really hard to start. We finally realized the starter motor was the culprit when it started pouring out smoke. We sent the old one off to be refurbished and then reinstalled it. With the car running, the next stage was to track down missing parts. I managed to find a new grille in New Zealand that was in better condition than our old mangled one.
As you can see here, this is the new badge that we got with the grille surround. This is the old Dodge badge from when it was in the crash.
While it was still in one piece, it needed a lot of work. The grille was rusty, had a few holes and was damaged at the bottom. We started by sanding it back to bare metal using a sanding disc on an angle grinder. Showcasing the before and after, we could continue sanding the other side back to bare metal. With that completed, I could spray down the old grille with a pressure washer to remove any of the remaining paint or dust on the grille. From here, we proceeded to repair any of the flaws with our new grille. We fixed the lower portion by bending it back into shape, bogged up any holes, and rebuilt it as necessary. It was then time to apply the primer before spraying the top coat. We originally started out using spray cans, but shortly upgraded to a proper spraying gun. While Dad did most of the spraying, I did get a few goes with spraying the undercoat. With the top coat applied, we could proceed to paint the other section of the grille. It had to be sandblasted to properly remove the rust before we could paint it. We spent the most amount of time painting the grille versus any other part of the car, so it definitely turned out the best in the end because we sanded it all the way back to bare metal. However, with both parts sprayed, we could attach them back together.
Oh my god. That looks amazing from the front.
With the grille perfected, we can continue painting the two pieces of the hood. Originally, we were going to only paint the repaired parts at the front end of the car and leave the rest. Although after seeing how good a new coat of paint looked on the front, we kept painting. The car was located in a shed on the other side of town, so we continued painting by taking pieces of the car off, bringing them home and spraying them there. This proved challenging, as after 80 years, a lot of the bolts didn't want to come out.
We've tried cutting the bolts, we've tried breaking the bolts, we've tried hitting the bolts.
Yeah, getting this last couple of bolts off. She's off!
With the rear fenders removed, we could give them a sand and patch up any of those dents with some bog.
Can never have enough bog.
Finally, we can spray on our undercoat and top coat layers. I would say removing the parts to paint them was our biggest mistake. It would be fine for the front end and any smaller parts, but after removing the back door, we decided to paint the rest of the car in one go, as we had issues later on because of some bent door pins. However, with the door removed, we bogged up any of the holes and gave it a fresh coat of blue paint. After this, we invested in a generator which allowed us to get power down at the shed where this car was kept. This meant we could power up our compressor and spray the remaining parts of the car. We started by painting the inside of the fenders and the boot in black, and after masking everything off, we could paint the whole car in a nice, lovely blue colour. Not only have we never sprayed a car before, but my father and I have never even done any work on a car before, so we really dived into the deep end with this project. After painting comes the brakes. This was a difficult and tedious process that required a special wheel hub pulling tool as of an inner locking pin holding the hub in place.
Here we go, big moment.
We eventually got them removed and could take a look at the brake cylinders.
Whoa, look at the crud.
All of them were leaking quite bad and needed their seals replaced.
Right, here's your piston. Little end cap on it here. That goes there, and the seal flat side to the piston, like that. And the spring just goes into that groove, and that all goes in there.
After replacing all of the seals in the cylinders in the brake drums and the master cylinder, we can now bleed all the brakes to ensure we have a working brake system. We also installed our new exhaust, as well as a few other bits and pieces.
Brake shift anvil, people.
We then proceeded by giving some more components of the car a good clean. We took off the fuel pump as we thought it was a component likely to need some maintenance. So we disassembled it and cleaned it in petrol.
So all that crud, it's probably flew up then into there. Jammed it up.
And to my surprise, it was quite grotty indeed. A fair bit of muck came out of this, but afterwards, it was nice and clean and could be reinstalled onto the side of the engine. I rewired a good portion of the electricals in the Dodge, as many of the wires had disintegrated, as they're made from a sort of cloth-like material rather than the rubber wires that we see today. There was a lot of things that had been tacked on over the years, including an upgrade to blinkers, which is a good upgrade to say the least, but it was done quite poorly. So I tidied everything up, moved a few grounding points, and neatened all the wires underneath the dash. One of the last repairs we had to do to this car was replace the water pump, which finally wore out and started leaking a serious amount of water. Parts for the engine itself are quite easy to come by, as variations of this engine were in production for quite a long period of time. I think the state that it's in now is really nice. It's very original. The engine is 85 years old, has never been rebuilt or reconditioned. It's got all the original interior, and we wanted to keep the car as original as possible because we want to feel like we're driving in the 1930s, not like we're driving a modern car. And that definitely is true with the end result.
Yes, it's definitely got the old smell.
Yeah. With our vintage car restored, it was time to take it out on an adventure. One of the greatest things about owning a vintage car is joining a car club to meet like-minded people with similar cars. We took the car up to Beechworth in August of 2019 to join in on a week-long trip with the Australian Dodge Club. I've included some highlights of our drives so you can get a feel of what it was like driving around in this car. As this car is from the 1930s, it's using an obsolete measurement system from the time, with its top speed being 45 miles per hour or 72 kilometers per hour in modern measurements. So this is it. A once crashed vintage car has been restored as part of the ultimate father-son project. For two people who knew nothing about cars, I think we did pretty good. It's not perfect, but we're okay with that. It's missing one hubcap and has a few other minor things not perfect. And with its engine being 85 years old, the next step for this car would probably be an engine rebuild in a few years. But that's the joy of owning a project car. There's always something to do on it. Our aim was to restore the car while keeping it as original as possible, and I believe we achieved this. We reinstated the two-tone colour scheme, kept and repaired the original interior, which is definitely something you don't see on many cars of this age. A lot of the internal frame of this car is made of wood, and the dash, well, it's painted to look like wood, but it's actually just metal. Around the back of the car, you'll find the boot. Opening it up, you can see inside we've got the spare tyre, jumper leads, and some spare oil. You may have noticed the ram hood ornament is missing one horn. This apparently broke off during the accident. The ornament is also snapped in two at the base, but we managed to glue it back together. So our ornament tells a story behind this very car. If you had the opportunity to do this whole process again with a different vintage car, would you do that, or would you just buy one already done up by somebody else?
I think doing it yourself is a worthwhile undertaking, but I wouldn't do it again because it's very time consuming. There's more in it than you think. I don't think we'd part with the car after all the effort we've put into it, and we certainly enjoyed driving it. So there we have it, the story behind my iconic vintage 1935 Dodge. This project fueled my love for restoring things, and without it, who knows if I'd love restoring things the way I do. I'd like to thank my dad for coming on and being a part of the video. It's been a pleasure, Hugh. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffreys video. If you like what you saw, hit that subscribe button and consider checking out my website or social media for some awesome photos of this Dodge. Who knows where our next journey will take us. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.